The echoes of Blackwood Hall. Eleanor Vance had always embraced change. Or, at least, that's what she told herself as she stared up at the imposing Gothic facade of Blackwood Hall. Built in the late 1800s, it now served as the primary residence for female students attending Crestwood University. The hall resident assistant, Miss Davies, a perpetually tired woman in her late 20s, blamed the old wiring. "Just the joys of historic preservation, girls," she'd quip with a forced smile. Eleanor, pragmatic, accepted the explanation. Old buildings had quirks. Then came the cold spots. Patches of air in the third-floor corridor that would suddenly drop several degrees, chilling Eleanor to the bone even with the heating blasting. The hairs on her arms would prickle, a sensation that made her glance around nervously. She'd check the radiators, look for open windows. Nothing. She blamed drafts, the structural inefficiencies of a centuries-old building. But she noticed some of the other girls, particularly the quieter ones, sometimes shivered, rubbing their arms, casting quick, uneasy glances into the darker corners of the hallway. The first truly unsettling incident involved a missing item. Sarah, Eleanor's roommate, was meticulous about her belongings. One Tuesday morning, she frantically searched for her favorite silver locket, a family heirloom. They tore apart their small room, searching under beds, in drawers, among laundry piles. Nothing. It simply wasn't there. Sarah was distraught, blaming herself for misplacing it. The next morning, as Eleanor was getting ready for an early lecture, she found the locket. It was hanging perfectly, inexplicably, on the handle of their shared wardrobe, a place they had both checked multiple times. Sarah gasped. "But it wasn't there!" Eleanor, projecting a calm she didn't quite feel, dismissed it as Sarah's forgetfulness, the chaos of dorm life. But a small seed of unease was planted. The incident was logged in their internal roommate memo as "Locket misplacement resolution found." Dorm life, Eleanor thought, always preferred a tidy explanation. But the unaccounted sounds continued, not just creaking floors or pipes groaning, faint, high-pitched whimpers that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, particularly after midnight, when the hall was mostly quiet, followed by peculiar clicks and scratches like something mechanical yet organic, too precise to be rats, too subtle to be structural decay. She'd sit up in bed, heart thumping, straining her ears, but they would always vanish, leaving only the oppressive silence. She blamed the old building settling, the wind playing tricks on the ancient wood, but her sleep grew restless. The anomalies escalated, subtle yet persistent, gnawing at Eleanor's rigid, logical framework. Objects began to move more frequently. Books on shelves would be found subtly rearranged. A forgotten scarf draped over a chair would inexplicably be found folded neatly on her pillow. Eleanor, a fresh-faced 19-year-old with an unshakable optimism and an almost pathological need to prove her independence, had chosen Blackwood Hall precisely for its history, its rumored eccentricities. The faint, high-pitched hum she'd occasionally heard now became a constant, low thrum, seeming to resonate from within the very walls of Blackwood Hall, particularly after the library closed. It was a painful throb in her ears, an underlying vibration in the air. They were no longer indistinct. They were voices, sometimes faint, sometimes chillingly direct, calling out fragmented phrases. Lonely, cold, play with us, find. She heard a child's soft sob, a woman's desperate plea, a girl's desperate gasp, always seeming to emanate from the walls themselves or from the dark corners of the rooms. She'd pause her studying, straining her ears, but they would always fade, replaced by the sterile hum of the fluorescent lights. She noticed the other girls on the floor seemed to be affected. Maria, a quiet art student who rarely left her room, started complaining of ringing in her ears and seeing things in her peripheral vision, fleeting, dark forms that vanished when she looked directly. Jessica, a boisterous athlete, developed an inexplicable aversion to the third-floor common room after dark, often making excuses to study elsewhere. Even Sarah, usually so bubbly, grew quieter, her laughter less frequent, her eyes holding a new wariness. Despite her own escalating fears, Eleanor found herself projecting the calm, rational facade of a science student. Sleep deprivation, girls. Too much caffeine. Long, steady sessions get to you. She heard her own words, flat and authoritative, and they felt like a betrayal of the truth she was experiencing. The feeling of being watched became a constant, suffocating weight. She felt eyes on her from the darkened corners of the hallways, from the narrow, silent stairwells of Blackwood Hall. She'd spin around, her textbooks ready as a defensive weapon, only to find empty space, cold and still. The ornate mirrors in the common room, usually so comforting in their antique charm, now felt like unblinking eyes, reflecting an unseen presence. She started researching the hall's history more deeply. Blackwood Hall. It had been built on the site of a tragic fire that ravaged a girls' boarding school in the late 1800s, a fact vaguely mentioned in a dusty university archive book. She'd heard the whispers, of course, the usual ghost stories that cling to any old building like ivy, disembodied voices, flickering lights, the occasional cold spot. The school, St. Agnes's Academy, had burned down in a cold winter, claiming the lives of dozens of young girls and several nuns. The current hall was erected shortly after, incorporating some of the original foundation and even a few surviving walls from the old school. There were vague mentions of a sealed sub-basement in the earliest blueprints, a section beneath the third-floor wing listed simply as access prohibited, condemned. It was unmapped in current schematics. Rumors among the few older, longer-serving faculty spoke of strange sounds coming from below ground during the early years, particularly after heavy rains. They called it the Children's Lament. She pulled a reluctant Miss Davies aside one quiet morning, her shift ending. "Miss Davies, tell me about Blackwood Hall and anything you know about what's underneath the third floor. There are rumors." Davies stiffened, her gaze darting around the deserted common room. "Eleanor, with all due respect, it's just an old building. Old places make noises, and students make up stories." "Miss Davies," Eleanor pressed, her voice low, "I'm experiencing things on this floor. We all are. And I need to know if it's connected to whatever history this place has. The old school, the fire." Davies sighed, a heavy, resigned sound. They say some of the girls from St. Agnes's, they were buried right where this hall is now, before the new foundations were laid. A mass grave after the fire, just temporary, until they could move them. But the ground was frozen, and the university was eager to rebuild, so they never did. They just built over it. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "And some say they never left. They're still here, and they don't like being forgotten or disturbed." Her eyes, for a moment, held a raw, primal terror that Eleanor recognized, a mirror of her own growing dread. "And then there's the whispers. They say the whispers. They learn. They mimic. They feed on loneliness. After that conversation, the whispers in the long, empty corridors of the third floor were no longer just indistinct murmurs. They were voices, direct, personal, mimicking the voices of her classmates, of the RAs, even of her own family. She heard Sarah's bubbly voice, soft and teasing, calling from just outside their room. "Eleanor, you awake? Got something to tell you. Come out and play." She'd freeze, heart hammering, knowing Sarah was at an early class, but the ache in her chest was excruciating, followed by a faint, guttural giggle that seemed to emanate from the very floorboards beneath her feet. It was using their voices. It was mocking her. Eleanor, a science major, dismissed them as structural quirks, drafts, and overactive imaginations fueled by too many late-night study sessions. She was starting her sophomore year, having transferred from a modern, sterile campus that felt more like a corporate park than a place of learning. She started seeing fleeting shadow figures in the corners of her vision, coalescing for a split second into familiar forms. A small child in a nightgown, a grieving parent, a fellow student, before dissolving back into the darkness. Her own reflection in the antique mirror in the common room seemed to distort, her features twisting into a fleeting grimace, a look of utter despair before normalizing. It was preying on her mind, twisting her thoughts, trying to isolate her further. She developed a slight tremor in her hands, barely noticeable but present. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Her logical mind, her anchor, was slipping. She barked at Sarah, then immediately regretted it, retreating further into herself. Sarah, seeing her usually composed roommate unraveling, began to look at her with a mixture of fear and pity. She started spending more time at friends' rooms on other floors, leaving Eleanor truly alone. The entity, whatever it was, knew. It was nurturing her despair, cultivating her isolation. One night, the whispers in the long, empty corridor of the third floor became a cacophony, a swirling vortex of voices, all of them her, all her insecurities, all her doubts, all the people she missed. And then, from the depths of the hum, a clear, distinct sound. A child's nursery rhyme, sung in a chilling, off-key harmony. The same one she'd read about in her research, a popular one from the late 1800s, followed by that guttural giggle, now louder, more confident. She looked at the antique rocking chair in the common room, gently swaying, seemingly on its own. She felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to just sit, to let the voices wash over her, to surrender to the strange, alluring peace they offered. "Just rest, Eleanor. It's so tired. We're so tired. Join us." Peace awaits. She fought it. She slammed her fists on the old wooden desk, yelling into the empty air, "Get out of my head! You won't break me!" But the voices only grew louder, mocking her, promising an end to her suffering, promising her understanding. She knew what she had to do. She had to go to the sealed sub-basement. She had to understand. She had to face it, whatever it was. She waited until the early hours of the morning, when the hall was at its quietest, Miss Davies making her rounds on another floor. She found the old access panel hidden behind a forgotten tapestry in a rarely used linen closet on the third floor, just as her research had indicated. It was rusted shut, bolted with heavy ancient locks. Blackwood Hall, with its towering chimneys, intricate gargoyles, and leaded glass windows, promised character. It promised stories. It promised an escape from the bland predictability of her past. Using a discarded wrench she found in the building's old maintenance room, she pried it open, the screech of protesting metal echoing eerily in the silent hall. The air that rushed out was cold, thick with the scent of damp earth, stagnant water, and something else, a faint, cloying sweetness like decaying flowers. The hum vibrated through the floor beneath her boots, a visceral sensation. She descended, flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive gloom, revealing damp, crumbling stone walls dripping with condensation. The air grew colder, heavier. The whispers here were deafening, a relentless assault on her mind, weaving around her, urging her deeper. She heard the pleading cries of children, the desperate shouts of adults, all speaking her name, all promising her peace if she just surrendered, if she just listened to their stories. She reached the bottom of the stairwell, a vast, cavernous space. It was not a maintenance area. It was a network of tunnels, ancient, earthen, some shored up with crumbling timbers, leading off into absolute darkness. The walls dripped with moisture, and the floor was muddy, slick. The hum was overwhelming here, a painful thrumming in her teeth. And everywhere, the cloying scent of sweet decay and damp earth. Her flashlight beam swept across the ground. She saw them. Small, faint indentations in the mud, too numerous to count. And then, at the far end of the chamber where one of the tunnels disappeared into impenetrable blackness, she saw something else. A small, charred wooden doll, half buried in the mud, its fabric faded, its button eyes melted, a child's toy. As she stood at the edge of the muddy chamber, the whispers coalesced, forming a single, multi-tonal voice, resonating from the depths of the black tunnel, vibrating through her very being. Welcome, Eleanor. You hear? Our stories, our pain. We are so many. Lost, forgotten. Join us. She stumbled back, gasping. She saw it then, in the darkness of the tunnel mouth. Not a distinct shape, but a shimmering distortion, like heat haze coalescing into a vague, bipedal form, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its head too small, and on its torso a faint internal glow like phosphorescence. This wasn't a ghost, not a demon, it was something else. She had chosen a single room on the 3rd floor, overlooking a sprawling, ancient oak tree whose branches scraped gently against her window panes. The first few weeks were everything she'd hoped for. Something ancient. Something that fed on the echoes of pain, on fear, on the fractured minds of young women. It was the collective anguish of all those lost souls, trapped and assimilated, forming a singular, hungry entity. And it had been calling to her, luring her. She raised her phone, its flashlight beam piercing the darkness. She aimed it at the shimmering form, at the heart of the void. She clicked it on and off, a desperate, illogical act of defiance. The light seemed to briefly flicker within the entity. For a split second, the void seemed to shriek, a sound that was pure agony and ancient rage, a million voices screaming in unison, tearing at her sanity. The cold became unbearable, sucking the warmth from her body. The whispers intensified, a furious, vengeful roar, then abruptly ceased. The cold receded, the silence descended. The shimmering form vanished into the darkness of the tunnel. She stood there gasping, the phone heavy in her hand, her body trembling uncontrollably. It was gone. She had done something. She had driven it back. But she knew with a horrifying certainty that she hadn't defeated it. You don't defeat something that old, something that fundamental, something that feeds on pain. You only make it angry, and it was still there, slumbering beneath the hall, waiting. She made it out of the sub-basement, scrambling back up the stairs, her body aching, her mind a shattered mess. She replaced the access panel, fumbling with the heavy bolts, her fingers numb. She emerged into the silent, brightly lit third floor, everything appearing perfectly normal, as if nothing had ever happened. She was found hours later, slumped in the common room, catatonic. She was quietly withdrawn from Crestwood University, diagnosed with severe stress-induced psychosis and dissociative episodes. They put her on medication, therapy. They tried to fix her. She lives in a small apartment now, in a bustling city, far from any old buildings, far from any profound silence. She avoids quiet. She leaves the television on, always, a low hum of white noise to drown out the others. She checks her reflection endlessly, scrutinizing her own face, half expecting it to distort, to stretch, to show the void. She tells herself it was a breakdown, hallucinations, the exhaustion of studying, the pressure of university life. The hall bustled with life. The cacophony of laughter from the common room, the quiet murmur of study groups in the library, the constant ebb and flow of young women navigating their new lives. Her roommate Sarah was a bright, bubbly journalism student, quick to laugh and even quicker to gossip. She repeats it like a mantra, a fragile shield against the terrifying truth. She clings to logic, to reason, but the shield is riddled with holes. From that day, she still remains thinking about it. She feels the faint, inexplicable cold spots even in the warmth of summer. She sometimes catches the cloying sweet decay, like decaying flowers, on a breeze or in the stillness of the night. She hears faint whispers, just on the edge of hearing, calling her name, promising her oblivion, echoing her deepest regrets, the cries of the lost. She scrutinizes the faces of strangers, the expressions of friends, looking for that subtle distortion, that unnatural stretch of a smile, that emptiness in the eyes, that faint vertical blink. She knows it's still there, beneath Blackwood Hall, slumbering. And she knows, with a horrifying certainty, that she carried a piece of it with her, a resonance that was forever altered, forever open to the echoes of the lost. She escaped the hall, but she did not escape the entity. She is safe for now. She is forever haunted by the chilling knowledge that beneath the familiar foundations of our world, ancient, hungry things lie dormant, waiting for the curious, waiting for the isolated, waiting for the pain, forever ensuring that some absences, once experienced, can never truly be filled. And she will always wonder what stories it now whispers, what pain it now feeds upon, and if one day its weeping will break through the very ground and reach for her again. The other girls on their floor, a mix of sophomores and juniors, were welcoming, if a little cliquish. Eleanor settled in, her boxes unpacked, her books neatly arranged, her life seemingly falling into a comfortable, exciting rhythm. Then the rhythm began to shift. It started subtly, as these things always do, like a forgotten melody played just out of tune. The lights on the third floor would flicker, not a power outage, just a momentary dip, barely a second, but enough to make the hallway lamp stutter, the overhead fan in the common room briefly whine. Thanks for watching. The veil between our world and theirs is thinner than you think. Each like, each share, each subscription strengthens the connection. Feed the channel before it feeds on you.